When we talk about a film being dangerous, I think we need to be talking about those productions where people are basically put into harm's way for the worst possible reasons. Risks of injury and death that could have very well been avoided, and generally just an occupational hazard to be even on set. Yes, we've talked about movies like this before on the channel, but this one I think takes the crown as the single most dangerous movie of all time, and when I tell you about it, that's not even clickbait, this is probably true. And that movie is called Raw. Ha, thanks Tony. That movie called Raw, a movie that was considered so insanely dangerous, took 11 years to make. This is Brainspill, my name is Tank, and today we're talking about the movie Raw and how goddamn ridiculous it was to make this thing and just everything that went into it for the sheer recklessness of what they decided to do and the fact that, well, with wild animals involved, anything can happen. This is the story of how a movie turned into sheer chaos, but whilst filming the movie Raw, what was the public reception like to this movie? And was it even worth making in the first place? Before we jump in, if you liked the video, be sure to subscribe to never miss an upload. Raw, a cinematic endeavour that unfolded in the 1970s, is not merely a film but a legendary saga of insane filmmaking decisions, earning its reputation as one of the most dangerous and controversial productions in the history of filmmaking. Helmed by Noel Marshall, who not only directed but also starred alongside his then wife Tippi Hedren and their kids, including a fledgling Melanie Griffith, the film took the unconventional route of employing real wild animals as its principal cast. I mean, come to think of it, what's so wrong with that? I can name you a bunch of movies in one hand that had animals in that all seemed perfectly fine, but I'm sure those movies had some actual trained people involved, not just someone in their back shed trying to film a movie about some dangerous lions. And also, I don't think any of these other movies made such a string of bad decisions in their entire production, which gave them the infamy that this movie has. At the heart of the film's notoriety lies the seemingly ridiculous use of untrained and unrestrained wild animals, ranging from lions, tigers, and leopards, for some unknown reason. So, what is the movie about, and what would warrant such a decision? The story of Raw follows Hank, a naturalist who lives on a nature preserve in Africa with lions, tigers, and other big cats. When his family visits him, they are instead confronted by the group of animals. Whoa, what an original concept for a movie. However, they wanted to do things differently. They didn't want to use special effects or CGI. No. They wanted the real thing. I know they probably wanted this to be as real as possible, so getting wild animals on set is gonna be as real as it gets. In lieu of opting for the safety net of trained animals or the magic of special effects, the production dived headfirst into the jungle of unpredictability, a decision that would come to define this very movie. The original budget for the movie was projected to be $3 million. So when all is said and done, let's take a guess how much it actually cost. Spoiler, $3 million was touching the surface. They started out securing lions they had acquired from zoos and circuses, keeping them in their house, which not only would have been extremely dangerous, but also illegal because without securing permission from the authorities to do so and not having the appropriate licenses, you're not meant to do this. For obvious reasons. And to be honest, that might have been the reason they did this, knowing full well that what they were doing they probably shouldn't have done. But they wouldn't have been able to make this movie if they hadn't. The idea of keeping the movie on track budget-wise might have been a bit of a far stretch, given that back in 1973, it cost them a staggering $4,000 a week just to feed all the animals they had on set. The family had to sell their 4 homes just to pay debts built up because of this alone, and Marshall's production company went into bankruptcy due to these mounting costs. They not only pawned their own possessions to keep the production above water, but also filled in various roles when making the movie to try and keep costs down, such as stepping in as set mechanics, boom mic and camera operators, and even included undertaking some of the veterinary work on the animals, such as administering vaccines and drawing blood where required, so no bloody wonder there were so many injuries on set. The production schedule was thrown into the long grass for a number of reasons, including the fact that they had real animals doing stuff. So you couldn't exactly puppeteer these animals to do what you wanted. They were real, living, wild animals, meaning that they basically just had to sit there with a camera for hours on end, watching these animals until they did something remotely interesting that they could maybe use for their movie. I wonder how long that took them to do. Yes, patience is a virtue. Whilst there was a script for the movie, the production of Raw quickly transformed from a conventional film shoot into a wild spectacle, with injuries becoming very commonplace on set. The real stars of the show, the wild animals, didn't just stick to the lines but occasionally added impromptu bites, scratches and maulings into the script. This happened so often that a couple of the lines were even credited as writers in the movie. And no, I'm not making this up, here's the proof. Due to the large number of untrained animals on set, there were a reported 48 injuries within the 2 years of the start of filming. It has been estimated that Raw's 140-person crew, at least 70 of them had been injured at some point during the production. So, this is where we do a quick fire round. We go through the instances of some of the most ridiculous shenanigans that happened on set as quickly as we can. Noel Marshall was bitten through the hand during a male lion fight scene, to which he almost lost his arm as a result. He'd suffered 8 puncture wounds on his leg from a lion, which was fairly normal given everything that was happening because he'd already been bitten 11 times before that. This would lead him to have to go to hospital where he was told he was suffering from blood poisoning and gangrene after being bitten too many times. One of the crew members had been scratched on the arm and bitten on the chest by a cougar, another being attacked by lionesses, who was feared to have almost lost an eye as a result of the attack, but thankfully recovered without any disfiguration. During a promo shoot in 1973, Hedren was bitten in the head by a lion whose teeth scraped against her skull. She had to be rushed to hospital and was given a tetanus shot. She also suffered another injury from Tenbo, the 5-ton elephant on set, which picked her up with his trunk by the ankle, fracturing it before bucking her off his back. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention they had other animals here too, such as elephants, so if that wasn't dangerous enough for you already, then just throw a few more into the mix. After this injury, she was left with phlebitis and gangrene, in addition to a fractured hand and abrasions on her leg. A few days later, the elephant had bucked another member of the crew off her back into a tree, breaking her shoulder. On another occasion, a lion had jumped on John Marshall and bit the back of his head, inflicting a wound that would require 56 stitches in the back of his head. Jerry Marshall was bitten in the thigh whilst a lion was in a cage with him on set, which also sent him to hospital as well. You would have thought at this point that they would have had somebody at the hospital just to be ready for these crew members to come in, knowing that just around the corner there was people getting bitten left, right and centre by wild animals. You know what, after the first few bitings from lions, you might think that, well, the entire idea might not have even been worth it in the first place. Another member of the crew was scalped whilst filming with a lion, requiring 220 stitches, but for whatever reason, decided to go back and film the rest of the movie. They must have been paid pretty well because this is an occupational work hazard and a half. Another lion bit assistant director Doran Cooper in the throat and jaw and tried to pull off one of his ears, when another individual received injuries to his scalp, chest and thigh and was admitted to the Palmdale General Hospital where he had to undergo 4.5 hours of surgery. The injuries were extensive, and whilst it cost the film both money in medical bills and time, there was perhaps an even more damaging incident that would be even more devastating than any of these animals could have inflicted. You might think at this point that that can't possibly be true, but you'd be mistaken. Pipes from the local canyon became flooded with water and burst on the 9th of February 1978, and after a heavy night of rain, this resulted in Marshall's property becoming absolutely flooded and completely destroyed the property and the entire set with it. 15 lions and tigers escaped from the set, and fences and cages collapsed. The sheriff and the local law enforcement killed 3 lions as a result of this incident, but thankfully many of the other ones were saved and corralled back up into safety. 4 members of the crew had to be rescued from the property because of how bad the flooding actually was. Most of the sets, ranch, editing equipment and film stock were destroyed. Over $3 million worth of damage was estimated to have occurred, which just so happened to be the budget of the entire movie. Well, shit. I guess that $3 million budget might have been a little bit too conservative of a measure to begin with. I mean, I guess they didn't expect this to happen, but if your original estimate was around the $3 million mark, well, you best get that number bumped up quite significantly. As a result of the flood, production was halted for a year to allow for the surrounding area to recover, to which filming resumed after it took 8 months to rebuild the set. However, despite this, they finished the movie. The final budget for the movie, despite it originally going to be $3 million, ended up costing $17 million, making just $2 million at the box office. Whoops, well, I guess that might not have been a great idea. And that probably didn't even account for the amount of lawsuits they had to face afterwards, but who knows. Website Rotten Tomatoes, with an average rating of 5.77 out of 10, according to the site's critical consensus, says, "Raw may not satisfy in terms of acting, storytelling, or overall production, but the real-life danger on screen makes it difficult to turn away." Marshall and his wife grew distant after the film was released, divorcing in 1982, where she would set up and preserve a house for the animals to be sheltered in after filming was completed. The plan was to use the proceeds of the movie to house and retire the animals, but given its box office bomb, this was difficult to achieve. Marshall tried his best to support the animals where he could, but would go on to never direct another film, dying in 2010. What's so strange about this, or when you really critically think about it, might not be that strange, is despite the fact that the movie bombed in cinemas, Raw has gathered quite the cult following, probably because of the sheer insanity of what happened during this movie. The limited release in 1981 failed to capture the masses, but the film found its audience amongst those who appreciated the bizarre blend of danger, comedy, and unscripted chaos that defined its creation. Raw is truly a one-of-a-kind movie, unlike anything we've ever seen or maybe will ever see in the future. If you guys enjoyed that video, here's another one just like it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.